1. The Great Pyramid of Khufu. On the Giza Plateau, 25 kilometers southwest of Cairo, stands a structure that has been studied continuously for more than 2,000 years. The Great Pyramid of Khufu was completed around 2560 BCE. Its base covers 5.5 hectares. Its original height reached 146 meters. The pyramid contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, each averaging between 2.5 and 15 tons. If those blocks were arranged end to end, they would stretch 2/3 of the way around Earth's equator. More stone is locked inside this single structure than in all the medieval cathedrals of Europe combined. We have studied it since before Rome existed. We have not finished understanding it. In 2015, an international research initiative called Scan Pyramids was granted permission by Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities to apply non-invasive imaging technology to the Giza pyramids for the first time. The team, led by physicist Mehdi Tayyoubi and heritage architect Yves Ubelmann, detected anomalous thermal signatures on the pyramid's eastern face. Certain limestone blocks warmed differently from their neighbors at sunrise, behavior inconsistent with solid stone. In November 2017, the team published findings in the journal Nature confirming the existence of a large void above the Grand Gallery. The void, designated the Big Void, measures at least 30 meters in length. No existing architectural plan accounts for it. Its contents are unknown. The technology used to detect the Big Void is the same muon tomography employed to scan the interiors of nuclear reactors and active volcanoes. It confirmed a sealed chamber the size of a passenger aircraft fuselage hidden inside the most studied building in human history. Officials suggested the void may be a construction gap, an intentional architectural feature designed to relieve structural stress. The stated reason for inaction is that further study is required before any physical investigation is warranted. In 2019, the Scan Pyramids team submitted a proposal to conduct endoscopic micro-drilling, inserting a fiber optic camera through an existing crack to observe the void's interior without damaging the structure. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities declined. No public explanation was provided. The technology exists, the permission does not. A sealed chamber has been known for nearly a decade. It has not been examined. It was not found by archaeologists. It was found by particle physicists. And it remains unopened. If the Big Void is merely a construction gap, why does it appear nowhere in 4,500 years of Egyptian architectural records? If fiber optic examination poses no structural risk, why has every proposal to look inside been denied? If the most studied monument in human history contains a sealed chamber no one has entered, what was placed inside it, and who decided we are not allowed to find out? 2. Poveglia Island. In the Venetian lagoon, approximately 3 kilometers south of Venice, Italy, sits a small island measuring roughly 0.17 square kilometers. Poveglia has been inhabited, quarantined, institutionalized, and abandoned across 12 centuries of documented history. It has been closed to the public since 1968. Estimates long present in Italian historical literature suggest that over 100,000 people died on Poveglia during plague quarantines conducted between the 14th and 18th centuries. That figure, if accurate, would make it one of the densest sites of mass death in European history, a concentration exceeding the burial grounds of many cities. The island's soil has been reported to contain human remains at such density that a significant portion of its surface layer is composed of ash and bone. Poveglia's documented history begins in 421 CE as a refuge settlement. By 1379, it had been placed under Venetian military control. From 1793 onward, the Republic of Venice used it as a mandatory quarantine station for ships arriving with suspected plague aboard. In 1922, its central building was converted into a psychiatric hospital. The hospital closed in 1968. In 2014, the Italian government auctioned a 99-year lease on the island to developer Luigi Brunaro for approximately €704,000. The lease came with strict restrictions preventing excavation or structural alteration. The island was not developed. Its institutional records remain in Italian state archives, catalogued but largely unreleased. Former staff from the psychiatric hospital, interviewed by Italian journalists in the 1990s and 2000s, described experiments conducted on patients in the facility's upper floors during its operational decades. Those claims have not been verified against institutional records because those records have not been made public. Officials cite structural instability and public safety as the reasons for the island's closure. The stated position is that access restrictions protect both visitors and the historic fabric of the site. Multiple research institutions have submitted formal requests to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys of Poveglia's grounds. All have been declined. Academic proposals to access the psychiatric hospital's archived patient records have been repeatedly deferred by Italy's Ministry of Health without stated timelines. The island's history, spanning 12 centuries, including the documented deaths of tens of thousands of people, remains unexcavated and unexamined. That history has been quietly archived behind preservation policies that simultaneously refuse to restore the site and refuse to open it to study. If the island is closed for structural safety, why does that restriction extend to radar surveys that require no physical entry? If the psychiatric records contain nothing of historical significance, why have access requests been deferred for decades without resolution? If a site where documented mass death and institutionalized suffering occurred across centuries has never been independently investigated, who benefits from ensuring it stays that way? 3. The Yonaguni Monument. Off the southern coast of Yonaguni-jima, the westernmost island of Japan, at a depth of 5 to 40 meters below the Pacific, lies a formation of stone unlike anything in the surrounding seabed. The Yonaguni Monument extends approximately 150 meters in length and rises 27 meters from its base to its highest point. It was documented for the first time in 1986. The monument stands as tall as a 9-story building. Its largest single feature is a flat-topped platform with near-vertical walls that descend in a series of stepped terraces, each dropping at angles inconsistent with random erosion. The steps cover an area larger than a city block. If the structure is artificial, it was built at a time when this seafloor was above water, placing its construction at the latest around 10,000 BCE before any civilization in the standard historical record existed. Dive instructor, Kihachiro. Aratake first observed the formation in 1986 while searching for hammerhead shark feeding grounds near the island. He brought it to the attention of marine geologist Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus. Kimura spent over 15 years diving the site and produced the most comprehensive study available, presenting his findings at an international geological conference in 1997. He identified what he described as tool marks, post holes, carved channels, and a narrow interior passage that he argued could not have formed through natural fracturing of the surrounding sandstone. In 2010, geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University published an independent analysis concluding that the structure was primarily natural, formed by seismic activity fracturing layered stone into rectilinear shapes, though he acknowledged certain features remained anomalous and unaccounted for. Among the features Kimura documented is a narrow enclosed passage running through the structure's interior. Natural fracturing of layered sandstone does not produce enclosed tunnels. That passage has not been explained by any natural formation model yet proposed. The Japanese government has not officially designated the Yonaguni Monument as an archaeological site, meaning no state-funded excavation has been authorized. Officials point to ongoing scientific disagreement about the structure's origin as justification for maintaining its ambiguous status. Kimura submitted multiple formal proposals to Japan's Agency for Cultural Affairs requesting archaeological designation, which would have enabled funded excavation and sediment analysis. Each was declined. The agency cited insufficient evidence of artificial origin. The circularity of that position is precise. The evidence required to determine artificial origin can only be gathered through excavation, and excavation requires prior classification as an archaeological site. Not because the technology to investigate is unavailable, but because the classification that would authorize investigation has been withheld. A formation on the seafloor that may predate every known civilization remains unexcavated, not by inaccessibility, but by institutional design. If the monument is entirely natural, why do its internal passage formations have no documented equivalent in naturally fractured sandstone geology anywhere on record? If the disagreement between researchers is genuine, why has no formal excavation been authorized to resolve it? If a structure potentially predating every known civilization exists in waters accessible to modern research vessels, why is the question of its origin being managed rather than answered? 4. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault. At 78 degrees north latitude inside a sandstone mountain on the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard, a vault was cut into permafrost 120 meters above current sea level. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault opened on February 26, 2008. Its tunnels extend 130 meters into the mountain. Its 3 chambers can hold a combined 4.5 million seed varieties. The vault currently stores over 1.3 million distinct seed samples from every participating nation on Earth. That collection represents more agricultural genetic diversity than exists in any other single location on the planet. A single chamber inside this mountain holds the biological foundation of global food production, varieties that, if lost elsewhere, cannot be recreated. The first and only withdrawal from the vault occurred in 2015, when an agricultural research center in Syria requested the return of its deposited samples after its own facility in Aleppo was destroyed by civil war. The vault's concept was developed by Nordic Gene Bank agronomist Carrie Fowler, whose work led to a formal proposal accepted by the Norwegian government in 2006. Construction began immediately. The vault was designed as a failsafe against the loss of regional seed banks through war, climate disruption, or institutional failure. What receives less attention is the vault's governance structure. Depositing nations retain legal ownership of their seeds. The Norwegian government controls physical access. The vault's complete inventory has never been independently verified by a neutral third party. The vault holds the insurance policy. No external auditor has ever confirmed the policy is intact. In 2017, meltwater from warming permafrost entered the vault's access tunnel for the first time. Water reached the entrance and froze before penetrating the seed chambers. What received less coverage was the disclosure that the permafrost layer the vault was built to rely upon has been warming at rates faster than the original engineering projections. Norwegian authorities described the 2017 incident as a manageable engineering challenge. Officials maintain that drainage upgrades and additional waterproofing have secured the vault's long-term integrity. Requests from independent agricultural organizations to conduct third-party audits confirming the viability and completeness of deposited samples have been declined by Norway's Ministry of Agriculture and Food, citing the vault's governance structure as the exclusive domain of depositing nations. No external scientific body has ever been permitted to verify whether the stored seeds are viable, accurately cataloged, or complete. The vault was designed to safeguard humanity's agricultural future. The vault holds that future behind a door. We hold the future behind a door. We have never confirmed what is behind it. We have decided that confirmation is not required. If the vault's contents are exactly what has been publicly stated, why has no independent audit ever been permitted? If the permafrost degradation was manageable, why was the structural risk never disclosed before water entered the tunnel in 2017? If the vault exists to protect global food security, why does its governance structure prevent the global community from verifying that protection is real? 5. The Copper Scroll. In Cave 3 at Qumran, on the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea in what is now the West Bank, archaeologists in March 1952 uncovered a document unlike anything else in the Dead Sea Scrolls collection. It was not papyrus or leather, it was copper. The scroll, designated 3Q15, dates to approximately 50 to 100 CE. The Copper Scroll contains a list of 64 locations where treasures are described as buried, including gold, silver, sacred vessels, and additional scrolls. The total described, if taken at face value, amounts to approximately 65 tons of gold and silver combined. That volume of precious metal would exceed the treasury reserves of many modern nations. No item on the list has ever been confirmed as recovered. The scroll was discovered by archaeologist Henri de Contenson during excavations led by the École Biblique in Jerusalem. Because the copper had oxidized and fused, it could not be unrolled. In 1955, John Allegro of the University of Manchester arranged for the scroll to be mechanically cut into strips at the Manchester College of Technology, a process completed in 1956. Allegro published a preliminary translation in 1960, arguing the scroll was a genuine location inventory. The scholarly establishment objected. In 1962, Father Yosef Milik, a leading Dead Sea Scrolls scholar, published an official translation characterizing the document as folkloric fantasy, a fictional inventory with no basis in material reality. Milik's interpretation became the institutional position and has remained so. Allegro mounted a physical expedition in 1960 to search for the first several locations listed. His team found tunnel systems and evidence of prior excavation at sites consistent with the scroll's descriptions. The structures the scroll pointed to existed. Allegro found no treasure, but he found the places. Officials maintain that the scroll is a legendary or symbolic text, possibly a record of temple donations preserved in memory rather than in material reality. The stated reason for inaction is that there is nothing to find. Jordan, which holds the scroll at the Jordan Museum in Amman, has not authorized systematic archaeological surveys of the West Bank sites the document references. The Israel Antiquities Authority has jurisdiction over many of the relevant locations, but has not funded expeditions targeting the scroll's coordinates. Allegro's 1960 expedition findings were quietly dismissed without independent follow-up. A document engraved on metal, a medium reserved in the ancient world for permanent records of lasting importance, describing 64 specific buried locations, has existed in institutional custody for more than 70 years. Not one of those locations has been formally excavated in direct response to its contents. If the copper scroll is pure fiction, why was it engraved on metal rather than the papyrus or leather used for every other document in the same collection? If the described locations are meaningless, why did Allegro find physical structures consistent with the scroll's descriptions at the first sites he excavated? If 65 tons of undiscovered ancient treasure is simply a legend, why has no institution ever directed resources toward testing whether that legend is accurate? 6. The Taos Hum. In and around Taos, New Mexico, a high desert community of approximately 6,000 people situated at 2,120 meters elevation in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Roughly 2% of the local population has, since at least the early 1990s, reported hearing a persistent low-frequency sound. The sound is described consistently across witnesses who have not compared notes. A rumbling drone, similar to a diesel engine idling at distance, audible more clearly indoors than outside. 2% of Taos residents represents hundreds of individuals describing the same acoustic experience in the same terms across 3 decades. Residents in Bristol, England, Windsor, Ontario, and Largs, Scotland, have independently reported acoustically identical phenomena during the same period. Thousands of people on multiple continents describe the same sound without awareness of the other reports. The sound has been documented for more than 30 years. In that time, its source has never been identified. In 1993, following years of complaints to local and federal authorities, the United States Congress authorized a formal study. A team was assembled from Los Alamos National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratories, the Phillips Air Force Research Laboratory, and the University of New Mexico. Lead researcher Joe Mullins of the University of New Mexico coordinated the investigation, which concluded in 1995. The team deployed standard acoustic recording equipment throughout the region, interviewed residents, and conducted environmental surveys. Their published conclusion, released in 1997, was precise in one finding: the hum existed. Their equipment could not record it. Its source could not be determined. The 1995 study confirmed that approximately 2% of residents were hearers, while 98% detected nothing. Multiple hearers independently reported physical symptoms, including headaches, sleep disruption, and vibration sensations in the chest cavity, suggesting not a psychological phenomenon, but a physical one that only certain individuals could perceive. Officials have since attributed the phenomenon to low-frequency industrial activity, seismic microtremors, or natural infrasound in the 30 to 80 Hz range, consistent with equipment of that era. The stated position is that a definitive answer awaits more sensitive instrumentation. The technology exists, the commitment does not. Low-frequency acoustic sensors capable of detecting sound in the 30 to 80 Hz range with far greater sensitivity than 1990s equipment have been commercially available since the mid-2000s. No federal agency has returned to Taos with updated instrumentation. The same phenomenon has been documented in 3 countries across 3 decades. It has received exactly 1 official study, conducted in 1995 with 1995 technology, consistent with industrial activity, consistent with seismic sources, consistent with infrasound, and consistent with no answer whatsoever. It has never been repeated. If the Taos Hum has a straightforward industrial explanation, why did a team drawn from 2 national laboratories fail to locate its source? If instrumentation has improved substantially since 1995, why has no agency returned to apply it? If the same sound is being reported independently by thousands of people across multiple countries over 3 decades, why is the search for its origin treated as a permanently closed question? 7. The Longyu Caves. In Longyu County, Kuzhou Prefecture, Zhejiang Province, China. 24 artificial caverns lie beneath a cluster of ponds that local residents had treated as ordinary bodies of water for generations. In June 1992, a villager named Wu Anai began pumping one of the ponds to determine its depth. After 17 days of continuous pumping using multiple water pumps, the pond drained to reveal a carved stone chamber of extraordinary scale. The chambers collectively cover approximately 30,000 square meters, an area equivalent to 5 full-size soccer fields. Individual caves reach heights of 30 meters, tall enough to contain a 10-story building. Excavating all 24 chambers required removing an estimated 1 million cubic meters of rock, a volume that, loaded onto standard freight trucks, would fill a convoy stretching more than 200 kilometers. That rock has never been found. No debris field exists near the site. No quarry in the region shows evidence of receiving it. Following Wu Anai's discovery in 1992, Chinese archaeologists and engineers arrived to document the chambers. The walls bore consistent parallel chisel marks at uniform angle and spacing, indicating coordinated and standardized labor. The chambers were interconnected through carved passages and featured load-bearing pillars left in place to support the ceilings. No tools were recovered from any chamber. No pottery, no artifacts, no inscriptions of any kind. Carbon dating of organic material from the walls suggested construction at least 2,000 years ago. In 2000, a team from the China Architecture, Design, and Research Institute conducted a formal stability analysis and concluded that the builders possessed an advanced understanding of geological load distribution, that the pillar placements and chamber angles reflected calculated structural planning. Not because the builders were fortunate, but because they knew precisely what they were doing. The 30-meter ceilings of the largest chambers remain intact after 2 millennia without reinforcement. The engineers who analyzed them found that the original builders had achieved structural tolerances that match calculated optimal values, not through trial and error, but through evident prior knowledge of load mechanics that does not appear in Chinese engineering records from that period. Chinese authorities have proposed functional theories including storage facilities and military barracks, but no official designation has been settled. Officials have described the caves as an unsolved historical puzzle that future research may clarify. Following initial documentation, the site was designated a protected cultural landmark, and further invasive investigation was prohibited. Proposals to use ground-penetrating radar to scan for additional chambers beyond the 24 confirmed were rejected. Requests to drill microsamples for comprehensive isotopic dating were denied. A site containing 1 million cubic meters of missing stone, built by an unidentified civilization using methods that leave no trace in the historical record, is open to tourists and closed to scientists. The investigation was quietly halted at precisely the point where the questions became impossible to answer without deeper access. If the caves were built as storage or military facilities 2,000 years ago, why does no Chinese historical text from any dynasty mention their construction? If the site is protected to preserve it, why does that protection extend to non-invasive radar surveys that pose no physical risk to the chambers? If 1 million cubic meters of stone was removed and has never been located, what else about the people who built this place has been equally and completely erased? 8. The Zone of Silence. In the Chihuahuan Desert of northern Mexico, centered near the town of Ceballos in Durango State, lies a region approximately 50 kilometers across where radio signals, including AM broadcasts, satellite transmissions, and compass readings, behave anomalously. The area sits between latitudes 26 and 28 degrees north at an elevation of roughly 1,100 meters. It has no official scientific designation. Meteorite concentrations within the zone are among the highest recorded anywhere in North America. Among the fragments found near its periphery are pieces of the Allende meteorite, one of the most scientifically significant meteorite falls in recorded history, which struck the region on February 8, 1969. That single fall deposited more than 2 tons of recoverable material across a concentrated area, more extraterrestrial matter in one event than many regions accumulate across centuries. In 1970, a United States Air Force Athena rocket test launched from a base in Utah malfunctioned and impacted within the zone. The warhead contained small amounts of radioactive material requiring recovery. The American military, with Mexican government cooperation, conducted a cleanup operation lasting several months and constructed a temporary access road into the region. During that operation, American scientists observed the radio interference phenomenon and filed internal reports. Mexican engineer Augusto Escamilla, who subsequently established a private research station in the zone, documented anomalous magnetic readings and recorded biological observations across the following decades, including plant specimens exhibiting unusual proportional characteristics. His findings were not incorporated into any official Mexican scientific registry and attracted no institutional follow-up. Escamilla's station documented tortoise and plant specimens within the zone exhibiting physical proportions atypical for their known species. Whether those observations reflect genuine electromagnetic effects, unusual soil chemistry, or observer limitations has never been determined because no formal biological survey of the zone has been conducted. Mexican scientific authorities have periodically attributed the radio interference to high concentrations of magnetite and iron-rich minerals in the subsoil, which could theoretically scatter or absorb radio waves. The stated explanation does not account for compass anomalies, satellite signal disruption, or the meteorite concentration patterns. No Mexican federal scientific agency has mounted a comprehensive interdisciplinary survey of the zone. The internal reports filed by American scientists during the 1970 rocket recovery operation have not been released to the public. Requests filed under United States Freedom of Information protocols for documentation from that operation have produced only partially declassified records. A region of anomalous magnetic behavior, documented signal interference, and exceptional meteorite density, sitting within driving distance of major research universities, has been quietly left to anecdote and private researchers with no institutional backing for more than 50 years. If the interference is caused by subsoil mineral content, why has no government agency conducted the basic geological survey that would confirm this straightforwardly? If American scientists spent months operating in the zone during the 1970 recovery operation and observed nothing significant, why do their reports remain partially classified? If a region of anomalous electromagnetic behavior, unusual meteorite density, and documented biological peculiarities sits within reach of major research institutions, why has it never been formally studied? 9. The Chapel of the Tablet, Aksum. In Aksum, the ancient capital of the Aksumite Empire in the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia, stands a small, heavily guarded stone chapel adjacent to the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains that within this chapel, the Ark of the Covenant has rested continuously since at least the 10th century BCE, according to centuries of unbroken religious tradition. The Ark's significance spans 3 of the world's major religions and is referenced in over 200 passages of the Old Testament alone. Its disappearance from the historical record, which mainstream biblical archaeology dates to the Babylonian sack of Jerusalem in 587 BCE, represents one of the most consequential gaps in ancient religious history. A resolution to that gap, if one exists anywhere on Earth, would alter the documented record of 3 faiths simultaneously. Ethiopia's claim is not recent. It has been advanced formally for centuries. No independent researcher has ever been permitted to examine what the chapel contains. Ethiopian tradition holds that the Ark was brought to Aksum by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon, and the Queen of Sheba, following a visit to Jerusalem. The account appears in the Kebra Nagast, the Ethiopian national epic compiled in the 14th century CE from considerably older oral traditions. In 1989, British journalist Graham Hancock traveled to Aksum and met with the then guardian of the Ark, who stated that the Ark was present and that he had personally seen it. In 1992, Oxford-trained archaeologist Stuart Munro Hay was permitted access to the church grounds, though not to the chapel itself, and documented physical evidence of very early construction in the surrounding structures consistent with the traditions of the site. The guardian of the Ark holds a lifetime appointment, lives permanently within the chapel complex, and is forbidden from leaving its grounds. He is, according to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the only living person allowed to see the object. When a guardian dies, a successor is appointed. The information about what is inside passes from one person to the next in an unbroken chain of single witnesses. The entire evidentiary record rests on a tradition maintained by individuals who cannot be interviewed outside the walls they are never permitted to leave. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church states that the Ark is sacred and that direct examination by outside parties would be spiritually and physically dangerous. The stated position is that the integrity of its protection requires absolute restricted access. Diplomatic requests from external parties for examination rights have been politely declined across multiple decades. Proposals for non-invasive imaging of the chapel's contents using infrared or X-ray technology, which would require no physical contact with any object, have not been formally considered by Ethiopian authorities. An object whose location has been precisely known and officially declared for over 1,000 years has been protected so completely from examination that its existence remains, in scientific terms, unverified. The investigation has not been blocked by loss or distance or the passage of time. It has been quietly and continuously prevented by a single door that no outside party has ever been authorized to open. If the chapel contains only a symbolic or representative object, why has the Church never clarified that distinction across centuries of international inquiry? If the Ark's protection is a religious obligation, why has non-invasive imaging requiring no contact and posing no physical risk never been formally proposed and evaluated by any authority with jurisdiction? If a single object could simultaneously resolve the most searched-for mystery in 3 world religions and close a 2,600-year gap in the historical record, who benefits from the guarantee that it will never be examined? 10. The Rishat structure. In the Sahara Desert of central Mauritania, 540 kilometers north of the capital Nouakchott, a series of concentric stone rings rises from the desert floor. The Rishat structure measures approximately 50 kilometers in diameter and is visible from orbit. It appears in training materials used by NASA to teach astronauts to identify landmarks from space. The Rishat structure is larger than the greater metropolitan area of Paris. Its outermost ring consists of raised quartzite ridges reaching 200 meters in height. At its center lies a plateau of exposed rock, whose composition differs measurably from the surrounding desert. The formation is so geometrically precise that the astronauts of the Gemini 4 mission in 1965, observing it from orbit, assumed it was a meteorite impact crater. It is not. Standard impact geology does not produce concentric rings of this regularity, this scale, or this spacing. Geologists Richard Croft Taggart and Robert Dietz proposed in the 1960s that the Rishat structure was an impact site. Subsequent analysis disproved the hypothesis. No shocked quartz, no impact melt, and no spherules consistent with a large strike were found in the surrounding material. By the 1990s, the consensus had shifted to a geological explanation, a symmetrical uplifted dome that eroded over millions of years to expose concentric rock layers. In 2008, geologists Matten, Jabrak, and Lee published a study in the Journal of African Earth Sciences proposing that the structure formed through a combination of volcanism and hydrothermal processes. That model was presented not because it fully resolved the geometry, but because no better model had been put forward. Since 2018, a growing number of independent researchers have pointed to Plato's description of Atlantis in the Critias, written around 360 BCE, and noted specific correlations with the Rishat structure, a series of concentric rings of land and water, approximately 50 kilometers across, situated near an ancient sea at a latitude matching the structure's location. Several of the geometric measurements described by Plato correspond to the structure's physical dimensions with a precision that researchers in this area describe as statistically improbable for coincidence, though this hypothesis has not entered peer-reviewed mainstream geology. No subsurface excavation of the central plateau has ever been conducted. If any evidence of prior human habitation exists at the site, it remains beneath the desert floor, unexamined. The geological consensus remains hydrothermal dome uplift. The Atlantis hypothesis is officially categorized as speculative and is absent from mainstream academic literature on the structure. Mauritanian authorities designate it a natural geological feature requiring no archaeological investigation. The Rishat structure's remote location in a politically volatile region creates genuine logistical barriers to research. Those barriers do not explain the absence of sediment core sampling or ground-penetrating radar surveys of the central plateau, both of which are standard non-invasive tools deployed routinely at far more remote locations for far least significant questions. The Atlantis correlation has not been disproved through excavation demonstrating the absence of human-era deposits. It has been dismissed through categorical rejection that precluded the excavation from occurring. Not because the evidence rules out habitation, but because the question has not been allowed to become a serious one. A 50-kilometer geometric formation in the Sahara, precise enough to orient astronauts in orbit with concentric dimensions matching a 2,300-year-old description of a vanished civilization, has received no subsurface investigation. If the Richat structure's geometry is fully explained by hydrothermal dome uplift, why do published geological models still contain unresolved parameters in their descriptions of how the concentric rings formed? If the Atlantis correlation is statistically coincidental, why has no excavation of the Central Plateau been conducted to confirm the absence of human-era deposits and close the question definitively? If a formation matching the precise description of a lost civilization written down more than 2,000 years ago exists in a location no ancient author should have been able to describe from ground level, why has the possibility never been tested rather than simply dismissed? Conclusion. These 10 places share nothing geographically. They sit on 6 continents beneath 2 oceans, in desert, Arctic, jungle, and open sea. They range from a mountain vault in Norway to a guarded chapel in Ethiopia, from a copper document on the shore of the Dead Sea to a geometric formation large enough to be seen from space. What they do not share is obscurity. Every one of them is known. Every one of them is documented. Every one of them is surrounded by specific recorded institutional decisions that have ensured they remain unexamined. Consider what is funded instead. Space agencies receive billions to search for microbial traces on distant planets. Deep-sea mining proposals generate immediate regulatory frameworks. Archaeological heritage funds are allocated to sites already excavated, already understood, already producing results that confirm what is already believed. We have chosen to leave a sealed chamber inside the most studied building in human history unopened. We have chosen to conduct one acoustic survey of a documented phenomenon affecting thousands of people and never return. We have decided that 1 million cubic meters of missing stone does not warrant a radar scan. We have decided that a document engraved on metal listing 64 buried locations does not require a single formal excavation. The mechanism is never dramatic, it is bureaucratic. A permit deferred indefinitely. A proposal reviewed for years and quietly denied. A research station established by a private engineer because no institution would fund one. A question declared speculative before the evidence capable of answering it was gathered. Who benefits from keeping these questions open and unanswered? Institutions whose authority rests on settled timelines. Governments whose cultural legitimacy depends on origin stories that cannot accommodate revision. Fields that cannot absorb a paradigm shift without acknowledging decades of misallocation. The suppression requires no coordination. It requires only the repeated routine exercise of discretion by people with the power to approve and the habit of declining. The secrets held by these 10 places are not protected by distance, by technology, or by the limits of human knowledge. They are protected by decisions, deliberate, documented, and renewed each year that passes without investigation, which makes the most troubling question not what these places contain, but who decided we are not allowed to find out.